In this video, we'll be going over the different structures associated with the larynx. We'll begin by going over 3 different cartilages that provide support and protection for the larynx. To begin, on the anterior side of the larynx, we see the thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage is the largest of the 3 different types of cartilage in the larynx and forms the Adam's apple that we see on the outside. Inferior to the thyroid cartilage, we see the cricoid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage begins on the anterior side and then moves to the posterior side. Superior to the cricoid cartilage on the posterior side, we see the arytenoid cartilage. The arytenoid cartilage forms little horns on the posterior side above the cricoid cartilage.
So then we have this structure right here. This is called the epiglottis. This structure sits above the cricoid and arytenoid cartilage and just inferior to the tongue, inferior and posterior to the tongue. The epiglottis, what its function is when you swallow, it actually folds down and covers up the opening to the trachea so that no food goes down the trachea, because when food goes down the trachea, that's what causes choking. And this is the epiglottis on a different specimen. So then just inferior to the epiglottis, we have these 2 little structures with a little space in between them. The structure on top are called, there's one on each side, those are called the false vocal cords, and the structures beneath those are called the true vocal cords. And their function is to allow air to come through, and they're what produce sound when we talk and when we make other sounds with our throat. And then the space between the vocal cords is called the glottis. Now the glottis is not only the space between them, but it also includes the vocal cords themselves.
Alright, so we've got some muscles on the larynx as well. Some of these muscles are pretty small, but some are noticeable, and they cover some of the cartilage that we've just learned about. So the first one that we'll be going over actually makes an X. If you can see this X right here, that X, you can see the striations form an X. That is called the oblique cricoarytenoid. And just deep to it, so just right under it, we have striations going long ways, transversely, and that's the transverse cricoarytenoid. So the term together is transverse and oblique cricoarytenoid. The next term we'll go over is the posterior cricoarytenoid, which is this large muscle right here that covers the posterior part of the cricoid cartilage. So this is the posterior cricoarytenoid muscle, this muscle right there. These 2 muscles, the transverse and oblique cricoarytenoid and the posterior cricoarytenoid, these act to control the amount of air that passes through the glottis, that space between the vocal folds. We can also see on the front side, the anterior side, we can see this muscle, which is the cricothyroid muscle. This muscle sits just on the anterior side of the cricoid cartilage, just above the thyroid gland, just below the thyroid cartilage. That is the cricothyroid muscle.